Welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. This is High Tea with Grace, where we spill the tea on HIT. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Charlene Son Rigby. She is CEO of RareX. Thanks for joining us, Charlene.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on. So tell us the path, personal, professional, that brought you to RareX.
So I've spent my career building software solutions for the analysis of big data, and that's been both in the enterprise as well as for healthcare data. And so prior to joining RareX, just to tell you about my geek credentials, I was at an organization where I was chief business officer, and we were developing artificial intelligence approaches to speed diagnostics of rare disease patients utilizing genomics. And so at that time, my second child was, I think, 8 or 10 weeks old when I joined that company. And pretty soon after that, she started missing milestones. And so, she wasn't sitting up, she wasn't rolling over. And, that kind of started us on this 3-year journey to try to find an answer for what was happening with Juno. And after many tests, we were able to get a diagnosis for her through a newer kind of genetic testing called whole exome sequencing. And this was ironic because this is the type of technology that my company used to analyze data from. So it was, I think also I'm so grateful because I think that if I had not known about this technology, we would not have pushed so hard for it for my daughter. And at the time, this was she was diagnosed in 2016. It was, really, it is becoming more and more accepted as standard of care and, importantly, covered by insurance. But, it was really considered experimental at that time. And so I do feel very fortunate, even though it took us 3 years. And so at that time, there were about 200 kids in the world who had an STXBP1 diagnosis, which is what my daughter has. And so we decided to start a foundation with 5 other families and really focused on advancing research, when there really wasn't very much research that had already started happening for STXBP1, and with the focus of really accelerating therapy. So you were asking me about how my journey has brought me to RareX. When we started working in advocacy for my daughter's disorder, we were thinking about, how do we collect data that is going to enable us to really accelerate understanding of this, disorder, this rare disorder. And I was talking with other advocacy groups that were kind of our brother and sister advocacy groups that had been started around the same time. And it was really interesting that we were all kind of doing things in a different way. And some of those things, some of those ways were bespoke. Some of them were, on Google Docs, and basically I kept thinking, if I put my software hat on, we would do this in a much more scalable way where we'd be able to, utilize and optimize our resources and also build a lot of learnings into a system. And so I started talking to the RareX team, Nicole Boyce, the founder, and the team last year, and was so excited to find out that there was an organization already doing this. And so
wow, bringing everybody together from the disparate sources. Thank you so much for sharing us your personal story about Juno. We're thrilled that she was able to get the diagnosis that she so deserves and needs. And it's very exciting, the work that you're doing now to bring people together in the rare community. So what kind of organization then is RareX? What's your vision for it?
So RareX is a dual organization. So first, it's a healthcare technology nonprofit. And second of all, it's also a patient advocacy organization. And I'm bringing this up because it took me some time to get my arms around it before I joined, because I came from the commercial world. And why it's important that we have this dual focus is that we really, even though we are building technology and a research platform, we really start from the perspective of what patients need to accelerate therapies, and patients really kind of they guide us. They're really at the kind of center and heart of what we do. So RareX has built a platform and a research program that enables patient communities to collect, structure, and share data to support acceleration of research, and of course for therapy development. And we're doing this across rare diseases versus just in a single rare disease, thinking about the point I was talking about before about how we can create scalable solutions and really lessons that we can, apply across the rare community. And one of the things that is critical to our approach is that we believe that patients should own their data. And so
yes.
we facilitate patients being able to share their data in the way that they want their data used for research. We have an innovative consent and data sharing agreement so that they're separated, so that patients can determine how they want their data to be shared, and they can actually update that over time. So that's been a really critical part of our model. And so through this, we have an ability to collect very robust, critical patient level data that enables us to inform research. And we also are able to give patients this true seat at the table for research instead of, those experiences where they sign up for a research program, give their data, and then have no idea what's happened to it, after the fact.
I've heard so many stories about that. Patients sharing their data and sharing their insights, and then folks never telling them how they use it or how it gets, who it's going to, how it's used, et cetera. And wow, what an amazing organization to do both the data side and the patient advocacy side, seeing how impactful both sides are. How important is data quality in this type of research? We hear a lot about data quality in the news and the challenges that come with having quality data. How important is it to this type of research?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing this up, because this is really the unsexy part of data, right? But it is really critical, and I'm glad that it's starting to become more visible. As you were describing, I talk about robust data and generating this critical robust data, but the reality is that you can't really do a useful analysis. You can't have reliable insights if your data quality is poor. And this is even more problematic if you're not just thinking about a single data set, but you're starting to aggregate up data. And so, I kind of think of it as like, it just sort of becomes like this soup of data. And so at RareX, we invest very heavily in data curation and in mapping to data standards. So that allows us to have robust data, from a structure standpoint, but then we also do manually, have data quality processes on the data before we open it up for analysis. Interestingly, this is still really hard to get funding for.
Wow. And to think how critical it is for the research, for everything that it's needed for. Wow, that's hard.
Yeah, I agree. And it is so ironic because it's a necessary ingredient to getting out, high quality results that then you can then depend on to, build research programs on.
I'm wondering, what are specific ways data and technology can be used for rare disease research in pharma and the life sciences in that particular area?
In tech, we talk a lot about big data. And Kazi Mustaq Hussain from Roche shared a really interesting concept with me that I think is really applicable to rare disease, which is meaningful data at scale. So how can we get meaningful data, meaningful amounts of data to drive forward our understanding of rare diseases and, therefore be able to accelerate therapy development? And it comes back to some of the themes that we've already talked about around robust data, accessible data, federated data, and how RareX has been approaching this is, actually we were started to really address several key data challenges from a tech standpoint. And so first is data silos. And this has been a traditional problem in research where data might have been generated in academia, in a specific group, or it might have been generated in industry. And then because of the way that that data was collected and managed, it's only available to that group. And we've really seen how in cancer and even in COVID, how we've been able to break through that paradigm and to the benefit, right, of being able to drive forward and accelerate research and our ability to develop treatments. In rare disease, we have an additional challenge that there's actually very few patients within any individual rare disease. So, in my daughter's condition, there are about 1,500 patients known worldwide. So that seems really small, but then, as we get to even, there's now over 10,000 rare diseases. And, so we're really getting to numbers where there might only be 1 or 10 patients or 50 patients known worldwide. And so these silos of data can really create severe limitations on our ability to characterize and understand a specific patient population. So that's one of the key data challenges that we were started to address. And then secondary is around lack of usable data. So studies may not have utilized data collection, which was based on standards. And so that can complicate analysis. So I'll just give you like a simple example that, for seizures, using different definitions for the types of seizures, or not using standard definitions for types of seizures makes it very, very hard to then aggregate data up on seizures.
Oh, that's so true, because I'm sure there are so many different ways that you can describe what a seizure is, but it's a seizure and why and how, and so that could be really complicated.
Yeah, and there is standard nomenclature.
Okay, there is.
That it's just that if groups are not utilizing it for their data collection, then it's really hard after the fact to map that to a standard nomenclature, because there's interpretation, right, in the way that a question is asked. And of course then mapping that complicates analysis, and then it creates that issue around the soup that we were talking about. And so we invest a lot in terms of utilizing standard measures, and then also mapping to ontologies to facilitate the downstream research.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, because I touched on this a little bit before about numbers of patients, but one of the biggest challenges in rare disease is that often data does not exist, because we have this tail of rare diseases where there are very few patients, or a disorder may have just really recently been identified. And so we have this challenge of not really having any robust information around what symptoms that this patient cohort might have. And so this is another area where data and technology is really critical for advancing our understanding.
Yeah, that is so wild to think about, the fact, because usually they probably aren't tracking the data too much until after they're diagnosed. And so maybe some of the things earlier on that are critical for research are missed. Is that kind of like something you're saying there?
Yeah. So I have an example. Thanks for bringing that up. I have an example from my daughter's disorder. So, we were extremely lucky that we had a 534 patient study published last December on her disorder.
Wow.
And so, this was huge in terms of our, advancing, first of all, awareness around the disorder, and also the fact that it was a multi-country, multi-center collaboration was also, super meaningful, going back to this point about like,
it's every rare parent's dream, to have that happen.
Yeah, exactly. And this data was pulled from electronic medical records. And what was surprising about it was that it basically cataloged symptomology. And in the area of speech or of communication, less than 40% of the patients were identified to have a communication issue. And we know from other information that from other studies that STXBP1 patients, by and large, are nonverbal. There are a few exception patients who have words, but by and large, the patient population is nonverbal. And thinking about this, so initially I was super frustrated.
Yeah.
But thinking about this from what happens in a medical encounter, if a child is going into the ER, or or even just generally with a patient visit, they're always with their parent. They're always with their caregiver. And so it's probably not noted in the medical record, even
that's
though
true, because the parent is speaking for the child and the symptoms and the
right.
True.
Or they're if they're coming into the ER, they're very, very concerned about if the child's having a seizure, focusing on administration of rescue meds, and and so it's they're not asking every single question, like, does your child communicate verbally, and so through being able to collect comprehensive data, where what RareX does is it starts with a head to toe type of high level data collection, and then if you say that you have any symptoms of a specific type, it will then ask you more questions. We're able to capture those types of symptoms which may have not been identified previously. And I think it's incredibly important for patient populations. Bringing together all of this data is important, but it's also incredibly important for patient populations, because sometimes, like this point about speech and communication has been well known within the patient community. And so that's why it's not just medical record data, but it's really data across all of these areas that really gives us that whole picture.
Wow. You really see how critical the role of the parent is to have that accurate data be in their child's medical records when their child is working through a rare disease, and also how critical it is, the role they play in many ways as the one responsible for that, as well. Are there other ways that parents of children with rare diseases can get involved with you and to help what RareX is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it's a good time for me to take a step back and talk about, so a couple of weeks ago, we announced that RareX is going to be merging with another organization called Global Genes. And I am extremely excited about this announced combination of the organizations. Our boards came together a few months ago and really started to think about what the shared vision for the organization would be. What would our added value of bringing together the organizations, the why. And what a key realization is that came out of these discussions was that we have, being an advocate today is very, very different from 10 or 15 years ago. And there's multiple drivers for that. So, we have diagnosis of more rare conditions becoming more common because of these new techniques of genetic testing, and we also have more advocates who are really jumping in all aspects of advocacy, including, really trying to jumpstart and de-risk research. And part of the reason why it's happening more now is that there's been these advances in therapies, and there have been the early successes, of cystic fibrosis, of SMA, and others where, it's really driving forward, the followers, if you will, to be able to, advance research to be able to start to push those types of therapies together. And, so that was the real kind of key realization. And from that, joint vision and value proposition around being able to serve this next generation advocate has come out, and that's really the focus of our merger. And so, thinking about parents and caregivers of children with rare disease, and I would even expand that to the patients themselves. So these are the folks who have the most urgency, right? They are so highly motivated because of their direct personal situation and the urgency to really make an impact for themselves or their loved ones. And there's a continuum now of things that advocates might be doing, from raising awareness to building community to starting to fund research to actually driving research. There's advocacy as well. There's legislative advocacy as well.
Oh, true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so thinking about what parents and patients can do, there are so many things, but I also realize that can almost feel overwhelming initially. And so there are specific things that we talk about even in the foundation for my daughter's community around how people can start to get involved. And so it can be participate in a single research study, answer a survey, go to a clinic and participate in research. It can be start a fundraiser. And, it doesn't have to be a fancy fundraiser. It can be a Facebook fundraiser. It can be, one of Melissa Hyoko, who runs development for STXBP1 Foundation, is always talking about how it can be what you love. So if you really love golf, if you really love making quilts,
yes.
Whatever that is, those things can really be turned into, ways to increase awareness. And they can also be, turned into ways to raise funds. And so there really are so many ways to really get involved and start to move the dial.
I love that. And congratulations on the merger too. I know that must be an exciting time for you all to kind of bring together the data and the analytics side and the, patient advocacy side, and now the parents and caregivers side all into one organization. It's truly fantastic. I'm wondering, in terms of the care side of things, we have a lot of hospitals in the health system listeners. Do you think physicians need to have better education on how to work with rare disease patients and caregivers? What do you feel like that would look like?
Yes. And that's all I need to say. No.
Yes, exclamation point.
So of course, physicians typically are not trained, on rare disease. There's a much more of a focus on looking at and being able to diagnose common disease for obvious reasons, but rare disease is critically important. And as we're finding out, 10% of the population is impacted by a rare disease and might go. My daughter's diagnostic journey was 3 years, and that's short for a diagnostic odyssey. And so really enabling us to more quickly diagnose patients, so that they can get into the best care possible, even if, there isn't, already a documented standard of care or a therapy. Since less than 5% of rare diseases have an approved therapy, we realize that there are, limitations to, what can happen from a therapy standpoint today, but that picture is really starting to change very quickly, and, even in my daughter's situation where there is no therapy, there's no approved therapies right now beyond, seizure medications. But the thing that was great for us is that we knew what the underlying cause was. And we knew that occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, and the ABA therapy that we're doing, the behavioral therapy that we started doing, are the right things for her right now. And that was extremely important. And
it
so
seems like physicians, it would really help for them to have an idea of what some of those pathways might look like physical therapy repurposing. We talk about drug repurposing and other repurposing, but it's almost like they need to figure out therapy repurposing in many ways for helping some of these children. What do you think about that thought?
Yeah, I agree. And really, thinking about what we can do for the whole patient, right? Because in some cases, as we were just talking about, we don't have a curative path yet. And so, what can we do to optimize the outcome for the patients with the tools that we have today? And I'll give you an example of, also because I think that what we really also need is expert networks and centers, because there are, over 10,000 rare diseases, which means that it's not enough to know rare diseases exist and even to know about a single rare disease. And I think that it's really, not reasonable for us to expect that physicians are going to be able to become experts in, all of these thousands of rare diseases. But, I think by creating centers where there is expertise in a disease area, where it might be, say, neurodevelopmental disorders, so as an example, RareX has been supporting a clinic at Children's Colorado, where they have a multidisciplinary neurodevelopmental clinic that is supporting 5 different disorders. And so we're providing technology support to enable them to capture data, collect data for analysis. And through this, they have a center that has expertise that is able to serve, families across a broader geography, even if they're not doing, the primary care provider. So I think that that's an important model, that families still will have a, primary provider in their local geography, but this is an expert clinic. And also the creation of these, expert networks where, there are experts in a particular disorder who, where we can really figure out how to make their knowledge much more accessible without creating burnout.
Yes, truly. That is really fantastic. I love that model that you mentioned, and it does seem like it's a very practical, possible model for others to follow. So really interesting stuff there. I would love to move now from kind of the professional side to the personal side. We have a lot of working women here that listen into the podcast, and we know you're a very busy professional in addition to the caregiving that you do. What are some things that you do on a personal level to really work your best and make a difference?
One main thing is that I have really accepted that the concept of work-life balance doesn't really exist. And once I accepted that, then it made things a lot easier for me, because I didn't feel that pressure to figure out how to make that perfect balance. And it's not to say that, I think what philosophy that I've adopted is that you can't necessarily have balance within a day, and you might not have balance within a week or a month, but making sure that you do the things that are important, including, spending time with family and not feeling guilty that, something else is not getting done, has been incredibly important to me. I also, have set up a, kind of structured care system so that, so that when I'm, because this is, I think, a challenge for, people who, either have, young children. So I have an 11-year-old and my STXer is 9, and people who either have young children or, they have a lot of caregiving responsibility, being able to find a way and where when you are needing to work, that you have the mental space to work is very important. And I know that I'm lucky in that I've been able to create that, but that's also been, very important to me to be able to have the professional life that I have.
Yes, that truly is so terrific to have that set up for everybody to succeed and everybody to live in a peaceful home and situation, because everyone's needs are covered in that case. So that's awesome. Are there any particular books or podcasts that really helped you on your personal and professional journey?
I have spent most of my career I've spent my career in tech, and I've spent a lot of that career in startup organizations. And so definitely a lot of the books that Jeffrey Moore wrote, and more recently, the Lean Startup book from Eric Rice have really been very impactful for me. I look for, I guess, two things. I always, even though I'm in a nonprofit now, we're building a product, and we need to be looking at it in terms of things like product market fit, and how are we delighting, our users. And so those I think are, kind of fundamental concepts for me that, have really driven a lot of, my thinking, and, also the type of organization that we're trying to build. So yes, that's that.
I know your employees really appreciate that about you, that you're really diving into this. What is the best leadership structure? What is the best business models? How are we going to make this startup really thrive? Because when your startup thrives, so does the rare disease community. So it's really critical and important. So to kind of finish off on these questions, what do you believe to be the future of digital innovation in rare disease research and treatment?
There is a lot of talk now on real world evidence, and it's like a meme, or a hot buzzword, and I think that there's still a lot around it about what does it really mean, and how is it going to actually drive forward our ability to understand whether therapies are working, understand what the long-term progression is for patients. But I think that it is going to truly be a significant part of the future, because as we are able to look at longer trajectories of data and deeper trajectories of data, where it's people living in the real world and we're collecting data in the real world, it is such an important complement to clinical trials, and it enables us to really capture that long-term data. So as we move into the world of gene therapies, where there's requirements for long-term follow-up after approval that are 10 years. And so real world data becomes very, very important for us to understand the success and some of the potential concerns that might come out because of a gene therapy. And then I think about that not just in terms of a single type of real world data or real world evidence, but how do we bring together multiple data sources in an efficient and high quality way, such that we're really creating the evidence that we need, to drive forward insight. So I am, there's a lot that needs to evolve in that area, but, I think that it's going to be a critical component of digital currency, for rare disease.
So interesting. It'll be very cool to come back in 5 years, 10 years and see, how far that has come, because I've heard that a lot in the industry. And I think people are working on it, like you and others, to make that impactful for rare disease and more. So truly terrific. So to finish this conversation off right, where can our listeners find you online?
So definitely check out the RareX website, and there will also be information on the RareX and Global Genes combination on both the RareX website and the Global Genes website. And please, if you want to reach out to me directly, you can reach me on LinkedIn.
That's terrific. Now, before I forget, did you happen to bring tea with you today?
I did.
Oh, I love it. Stanford, is that where you went?
Yes, I went here for undergrad, and we're actually having our reunion this weekend. So it's timely.
Oh, that is fantastic. I love to see it. And I today have my Once Upon a Gene mug.
Love it.
Effie Parks is well known in the rare disease community, and she sent me a mug, and I love this mug, and my kids do too. We got to always remember disability is diversity, right? It's fantastic.
I love that. And Effie's amazing.
That's too good. Well, thank you so much, Charlene, for joining us today.
Thank you, Grace.
And thank you guys for joining us too. Check out the Hit Like a Girl website and YouTube page for more great guests like Charlene today. Cheers.